Was I high when I typed all of the yes. I'm gonna be talking about some Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Monica in Mono, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about a couple of album releases from January of this year up until the end of March. I did try to add a little bit of more variety to this list, so hopefully you can find something that you enjoy. And I do have a couple of channel announcements at the end of this video, if you could even call them that. But if you are subscribed to the channel, that might be something that you would be interested in, so let's go ahead and get started. First, we have Blank Banshee with music for menus. This album takes Blank Banshee's signature undertones, especially from his first two albums, and strips them back to their core, resulting in a very immersive and introspective album. There are no vocals or vocal samples driving any of the tracks here. The album is ambient and minimal to the point where it is almost sterile, but it still feels warm and nostalgic. This is due to the sounds, which are reminiscent of late 90s user interface sounds, but the execution is very polished, which is expected from Blank Banshee. I felt that every sound was also provided with the perfect amount of space to breathe. It is made clear from the get-go the aesthetic approach taken with the opening track Home. However, there are some groovier and eccentric cuts like Menu 2 where some variety of textures are explored as well. What it really comes down to on this record is its unique sounds and rudimentary but effective motifs. An example is the super resonant pulsating synths on Menu 6 and Menu 4, which relies on the alternating of these fluty, whimsical synths with these hollow but questioning sounding synths. The closing track settings is also very good, which I like to describe as simply therapeutic. I just feel that a lot could have gone wrong with the direction taken on this album, but luckily the execution was right on point, resulting in a memorable and cohesive album that definitely stands on par with all of his other releases. Next we have Becoming Undone by electronic duo Adult. This is easily their most cohesive and polished album. They really achieved exploring some more variety on here while expanding on old school elements of EBM and no wave that have always been relevant throughout their music. The first track, Undoing Undone, has janky and disorienting synth and drum dynamics with Susie-like vocals, which we have heard before in previous albums, but they fit in perfectly with the album's punchy beats. But we also get some more abstract songs on the second half of the album, like Normative Sludge, which is cinematic with squeaky eerie synths and yelpy cathartic vocals. And Teeth Out Part 2 was a minimal ambient closer with dark pads, long ominous vocals, and memorable synth accents in the place of drums. Overall, this album is full of good danceable beats, dark driving synths, and memorable experimental takes. Next we have Rough Dimension by VR Sex. This album is definitely a little understated. Apart from that, this is also their most diverse and experimental album while remaining cohesive. You definitely get a sense that the group is trying to expand on some of their signature influences. The track Walk of Fame is shoegazy as all get out, very reminiscent of Andrew's Drab Majesty stuff with a steady mid-tempo and a looping guitar line. Off the bat, the track Victim or Vixen gives us a glimpse of how the group has expanded on the experimental tendencies from Human Traffic Jam. We have some darker post-punk that leans on dark wave like Snake Water, which had punchier drums and more by-the-number guitar tones. While I'm more of a Drab Majesty fan, I can respect the more mature approach on this album, which doesn't compromise on any of their signature sounds, which so far have been different variations of this synthy post-punk with a hint of shoegaze. There's experimentation with arrangement as shown on the opening track Victim or Vixen, which included a very nostalgic 90s type of guitar interlude and transitions over flawlessly onto the next track, Glutton for Love, which gives us more variations of this nostalgic approach. My only critique was that the album was definitely not as punchy, and there was a bit of a dip in the songwriting in the middle to the end of the album with the underwhelming chorus from Crisis Stage and redundant chorus on Live in a Dream. Overall, I think this is a step up from their debut, and there were improvements and expansions made to the base of their craft here, and I am very excited to see what they do in the future. Next is The Tipping Point by Mills Males for Fear. Next is The Tipping Point by Tears for Fears. This is the band's first album in about 18 years. Honestly, I haven't been a huge fan of their work since Raul and the Kings of Spain. A lot of the hook writing kind of went downhill for me, and The Tipping Point felt very inconsistent in its redeemable elements, such as their songwriting style and their perfect amount of experimentation. The album is full of attempts at what is more current in popular music, but at times it does come across as dated and generic. An example is the verses on Long, Long, Long Time, where the melody felt very by the book, which was unfortunate because I wanted to appreciate the effort in some of the production choices. This also carried over onto several other songs. For example, there were decent synth choices and placements all over this album, like on Break the Man, but the chorus felt very bland. There is some redemption on the title track, which had some glitchy accents, and Master Plan also had some interesting transitions, which helped with a lot of the progression of the melody. There's also some good uplifting synths that help with this as well. Now, most of the melodies were very lackluster, but the opening track and the title track gave some redemption in this department. There was also some refreshing nostalgic flair on Rivers of Mercy and Stay. And their more stripped back track, Please Be Happy, also recalled some Beatles influences, which isn't new for the duo, but still very interesting. So despite this being a very inconsistent album for me, I still thought this album was better than Roll in the Kings of Spain. It definitely still sounds like the band in some very rudimentary ways, but it still felt mostly uninspired. But it's still more than what you would expect from a comeback album from a band with similar longevity. Next, we have the band Curses with the album Incarnadine. They've definitely dipped their toes into a more direct approach, leaning towards goth rock with more standard song structures like in the opening track, Miriam. I enjoyed the pacing on Coma, which took a similar approach to Miriam. However, they incorporated a more danceable beat along with some semi-surfy guitars. That being said, most of the album is an overall improvement on their general dark electronic sound with more polish, including in the production. The sample usage and guitars on Smoke created some smooth dynamics. Blood Oath was also a dark, danceable, cacophonous track. My favorite track on this album is Deja Vu Inc., just a super punchy EBM-influenced track. My only complaint was a few generic sections in Miriam and Ghost of Arms, and Gretchen Blender felt like a semi-aimless interlude with some underwhelming sections to conclude a 5-minute runtime. I don't know if I enjoyed this more than Romantic Fiction, but it's mostly one catchy track after another and worth a listen if you'd enjoy danceable post-punk with an EBM flair. And even if you're more into the goth rock side of things, then Miriam would be right up your alley. Next, we have ASSASSUN with Sunset Skull. This is their debut, and the best way I can describe this album is dark EDM with post-punk and industrial influences. There also tended to be some eccentric attributes sprinkled in, but what tended to carry the weight a lot of the times were the vocals and how they played off of the synth work to help progress a lot of the tracks. For example, my favorite track on here is probably Your Scheme, which has a punchy beat and is defined by rudimentary vocal melodies and a danceable synth line. This created a nice staccato flow. The melody and chord progression was very fulfilling and provided great dimension to the track. Winter is a bouncy but janky minimal track where the vocals and whimsical synths paralleled each other to create a unique experience. And this carries over throughout the whole album. For example, Devours itself uses slightly harsher sounds to help progress the song. Over Again has a slightly underwhelming chorus, but the beat is still good, and the vocal performance keeps you interested. A lot of switching from ominous vocals to a more confrontational delivery. And on the topic of vocals, I Need It Gone's vocal style was aggressive and carried the other elements of the song very well. Overall, this is a great debut. I look forward to what they put out in the future. I'm excited to see how this artist will improve on hooks, since the potential is there, especially with the track Your Scheme. I'm also excited to see what direction they will go in as they try to refine their sound as well. Next, I'm going to talk about FATAMORGANA. They are an electronic band from Barcelona with heavy new wave and in particular synth pop influences. This is their second album following Terra Alta, which I also enjoyed. However, they are going for more variety on this album while sticking to their nostalgic 80s Spanish pop sound, which happens to be very light but bouncy, but I feel that they managed to experiment with some darker aesthetics on this album. For example, the opening track is minimal but makes a statement with its percussion and fluty synth work, creating a playful atmosphere. This is complemented by an organic vocal melody that wraps around the beat very well. There was also better song progression from the composition itself and vocal effects in the next level, which also had good melodies. The Isle of Bara also had very nostalgic synth melodies, so check out this album for some fun and bouncy dance gems. Next we have the album Are We Not Immortal Yet by cold wave post-punk artist This Cold Night. This album is still very much the same sound they've been putting out, which is super reminiscent of Lebanon Hanover and Joy Division, so overall very dark and moody, minimal post-punk. They also managed to keep their gritty, experimental characteristics while creating their most cohesive and memorable tracks. Atom Bomb is a chill synth-pop influenced track with dark undertones, especially as the song progresses, and although the closer the Titan in his tower is guitar driven and a little indie sounding, there is still an experimental touch with the drum choices on here. And one of the most memorable tracks, A Letter to Myself, was also guitar driven but still allowed the imagery and storytelling in the lyrics to shine through. So check this album for some minimal but detailed dark wave. Next we have vaporwave artist 18 Carat Affair with Body Double. Compared to their previous work, this album is a bit more abstract while subtly enhancing his signature styles such as New Age. These sound choices also embellish very well as opposed to taking the spotlight, which is an interesting approach, and it helps progress a lot of the tracks and keep them focused. This is apparent on the opening track, Program Initialize 7, with its variety of samples and synths, which go from suspenseful to ambient, and then it draws you out of the initial introspection with a loungy sample to help kickstart the immersion. The album is cohesive despite the variety on here, and it flows very well. I think this resulted in thoughtful production choices that created impactful moments that stayed with me even after listening. Next we have dark wave synth pop duo MELDAMOR. This is their second full length after their 2019 release, Esperanza y Dolor. The tracks overall have more energy to them, especially in the vocals, and particularly on Walk Away and Never Go Back, which has one of the most memorable hooks. These tracks also show the duo's improved use of drums, which helped with better dynamics. These dynamics were also achieved with more experimental sound choices. I really enjoyed this dewdrop sound used for some interesting accents on the track Why's Love So Mean. The opening track After reminds me of Sidewalks and Skeletons, but more post-punk, and is the most aggressive track on this album, almost to the point where it almost didn't fit in, but it's such a good track that I really didn't care. There was a lot of Karen O vibes in the vocals throughout this album, but especially on the tracks Black Abyss, which is supported by anthemic nostalgic synths, and Grim, which uses a similar approach but with more effective transitions. So I really like the combination of dark and harsh elements and vocals with softer elements from adjacent pop genres, and they managed to have obvious improvement in sounding more polished without losing their DIY sound. Right, and that is it. That is the list of releases that I had the most opinions on. So I want to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, then subscribe to the channel where I will continue to be posting music and album reviews. Hopefully I get to also post just some nice single album reviews. It just kind of depends on what's going on with my life. I also have an Instagram, I guess, now, so you can check that out. I'll try to post some promotional stuff on there, but it won't be annoying, I promise. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.